Donald Trump, the Epstein Files. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Jeffrey Epstein, the paedophile, died in 2019. Officially, it was declared a suicide, although many people suspect that he was offed as a consequence of the fact that he had a lot of detail on some powerful people, and those details are something that those powerful people didn't want exposed or released. Since then, there has been much talk about the Epstein files or the Epstein list, details of who was associated with Epstein, and in particular, those who may well have attended Epstein Island and engaged in behavior that they would prefer to keep hidden. A variety of names have been mentioned in respect of this, including Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, and Donald Trump. There has been much rumour and speculation. But in relation to Donald Trump and his relationship with the Epstein files, it provides us with an interesting opportunity to understand another aspect of President Trump's narcissism. When he was campaigning in 2024, Donald Trump promised to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. Here's what he actually said. In an interview with Fox News' Rachel Campos Duffy, when asked, "Would you declassify the Epstein files?" Trump responded, yeah, I would. He elaborated, "I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others, certainly about the way he died. It'd be interesting to find out what happened there, because that was a weird situation, and the cameras didn't happen to be working, etc., etc. But yeah, I'd go a long way toward that one." This clip was widely circulated, including by the Trump War Room X account, which posted it with the caption, "President Trump says he will declassify the 9/11 files, JFK files, and Epstein files." In a September 2024 podcast with Lex Fridman, Trump made a firmer pledge. When Fridman noted that it was very strange for a lot of people that the list of clients that went to the island has not been made public, Trump replied, "It's very interesting, isn't it? It probably will be, by the way, probably." When pressed further, Trump said, "Yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it. Now, Kennedy's interesting because it's so many years ago. They do that for danger too, because it endangers certain people, etc., etc. So Kennedy is very different from the Epstein thing, but I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I have no problem with it." Accordingly, those statements indicated Trump's campaign promise to release the Epstein files, although he did express some hesitation about the potential impact of the information. But it was clear, and many of his supporters were keen for the Epstein files to be opened up and released. Now, pausing there, what does that tell us? Remember, President Trump is a narcissist, and that means that when he's interacting with another human being or having a potential interaction with another human being, this is what guides him: the pursuit of the prime aims. Like a directive that is enshrined within him, although he doesn't know this, he is duty-bound to seek, maintain, and nullify threats to control. He is duty-bound to seek fuel at appropriate occasions along with character traits and residual benefits. That is what his narcissism does. This is what his narcissism sits there like a background app, ensuring that he achieves. Accordingly, when he says to those interviewers, "I'm going to release the Epstein files," or words to that effect, which is also going to be amplified to an audience, he is seeking control over the interviewer and the audience by making this promised gain. In essence, although he doesn't think in such terms, because his narcissism is not something he's aware of, he's essentially saying this: Be under my control, give me fuel, and what you'll get in return is I'm going to release the Epstein files. That's the transaction that takes place. It is a manipulation because the release of the Epstein files, when he talks about it, is entirely self-serving. It's promised gain. It's future faking. When he issues that statement, he fully intends to release the files because his narcissism has to make him believe that so that he is convincing. He's not sat there thinking, I'm never going to release them, but I'm just going to say it. When he says it, he means it. But because he's a narcissist, it is far from certain that he will actually deliver upon it, because delivery is dependent upon whether his narcissism gauges that it is worthwhile to him to make that delivery at a later stage. When he conducted these interviews on the campaign trail, what he wanted to do was ensure that the audience was under control and that he would gain their buy-in by way of votes, which would be a residual benefit. Therefore, his narcissism decided, okay, what do we need to say in this moment to get control over the interviewer, control over the audience, gain fuel by way of their responses, and also the residual benefit of gaining people's votes? I know, let's tell them that we're going to release the Epstein files. And so he does. But then there has been a shift in his position. His current situation and position concerning the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files, as at July 2025, appears to be inconsistent and is marked by a shift from his campaign promises. Since taking office in January 2025, his administration's actions and his own statements have drawn significant criticism, particularly from the MAGA base, for not following through on these promises. Key points about this are as follows. In July 2025, the Trump administration, through a Justice Department and FBI memo, announced it would not release additional Epstein files, stating there was no client list and confirming Epstein's death by suicide in 2019. The memo concluded that further disclosure was not appropriate or warranted due to the sensitive nature of the materials, including child sexual abuse content. Facing pressure from both supporters and opponents, Trump has since expressed support for releasing credible Epstein files, define that how you will, delegating the decision to Attorney General Pam Bondi. On July 15th, he stated that Bondi should release whatever she thinks is credible, indicating a more cautious approach than his campaign rhetoric. He also authorized a request to unseal grand jury testimony related to Epstein's case, though this is a small fraction of the files and requires court approval, potentially delaying release. Trump has also downplayed the significance of the Epstein case, calling it boring and a Democratic hoax in various statements. On July 12th, he posted on Truth Social, urging supporters not to waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, and later claimed the files were fabricated by political opponents like Obama and Biden. These remarks suggest an attempt to shift focus away from the issue amid growing discontent from his supporters, with some of them accusing him of covering up information. Accordingly, his current position is a retreat from his campaign promise of full declassification. He now supports limited court-approved releases of credible documents, while dismissing broader demands for transparency as politically motivated. Why has he now retreated from this position? And does he see that this makes him look hypocritical? The position that he now adopts is because at this particular moment in time, his narcissism determines that nothing should be released, or it should be a limited release on the lines that I've just described. Why? Well, it might well be that there really isn't any information available and Donald Trump is telling the truth. And therefore, when he made the promise back in 2024, he believed that there was information, and now he's found that there isn't. And therefore he's saying it's a hoax. There's nothing really to look at. And therefore, his response, remember, he's a narcissist, so it is still done for his self-serving nature, but he might be utilizing the truth as you understand it to be, namely, he intended to declassify the files, and now there's not really anything much to declassify, and that's what he's telling people. It's a possibility. And in order to be balanced, we include that. But remember, it's still self-serving because it's coming from a narcissist. Alternatively, there is information that's included that could be problematic for Trump. It could be because of personal involvement. He's always denied as such. There's no actual evidence to demonstrate that there's anything that is damning amongst the material. We know that he's had a repeated association with Jeffrey Epstein in the past and has been photographed together and they've attended functions together. But possibly there's something which is incriminating in the information which naturally would pose a threat to President Trump's need for control, and therefore his narcissism, in order to protect that need for control, decides we're not going to release the list, there's only going to be a limited release of some peripheral files. And it's done to nullify a potential threat to control. And therefore, he contradicts his earlier promise to release the files. He won't see that this is hypocritical because his narcissism won't allow him to see it that way. The compartmentalization of the mind of the narcissist is such that back in 2024, when the interviews were taking place, his narcissism deemed, in order to get the prime aims at this point in time, we will promise the release of the Epstein files. Now, in 2025, in order to get to the prime aims, we don't need to release them, or there's going to be a release of very limited information. It could also be the case, governed by the needs of his narcissism, that there's nothing incriminating in relation to Trump, but it might be that there's other information in there that could threaten his need for control in respect of other people. And therefore, his narcissism deems, don't release that information. It's a threat to control, nullify it. It also, and believe me, it could be something as simple as this. Because people are pressing him to release the information, his narcissism could regard that as a threat to control. It's a little bit like a toddler. It's time to go to bed. I don't want to go to bed. Even though going to bed is the best interest of that toddler, so they get a good night's sleep, they won't go because they're being told to do something, and they automatically defy that. If they get to decide that they can go to bed, then they will. And 1 minute later, they could decide, I'm going to bed, and off they go. But it's because they are being told what to do. And the narcissist, particularly narcissists of the level of Trump, can behave this way, whereby even if it is in their best interests, even if there is actually nothing to hide, the simple fact, because people are pressing him to release the information, that is perceived by his narcissism as a threat to control, with the consequence that he basically folds his arms and says, nah, shan't do it. Yaboo sucks. You might find that preposterous, but believe me, that is how certain narcissists will interpret it. You're telling me to do something, therefore I'm not going to do it. Yeah, but actually it's in your best interest to do it, and there's nothing incriminating in relation to you, and you promised you do it. Don't care. You're telling me what to do. You don't get to tell me what to do. I'm not releasing the information. Whatever the actual reason might be, whether there isn't actually anything there, whether it is a democratic hoax, as Trump suggests, whether there's incriminating information about Trump himself, or whether it's simply he doesn't want to be bossed around by people issuing demands to him, whatever it might be, the reason why he's not releasing the files is because it is commensurate with the needs of his narcissism. That is what governs his behavior, and it's important that people remember that. He promises to release it because his narcissism says promising that is a good thing because it allows you to control people, and it allows you to get fuel, and it allows you to get the residual benefit of votes. Now his narcissism says don't release it because releasing it would cause a threat to control, And whatever that threat might be, in a sense, is almost irrelevant for the purpose of understanding his narcissism. But the fact is, there is something about it, and whatever it might be, is a threat to his need for control. So his narcissism now says, don't release it in total. Do this sort of watered down release, which ultimately might not be a release at all. This is contradictory. It's hypocritical. And of course, it's causing problems for some of his supporters that he's backtracked in this way, which is a collateral consequence of his pursuit of the prime aims. But yet again, by understanding that Donald Trump is a narcissist like so many leaders often are, it enables you to understand why on the one hand he makes the promise and then reneges on that promise. It's because of his narcissism. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.